How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. I'm Shawn Drotar. This is Sandy Clough. Welcome to Sandy and Shawn on Mile High Sports. Thanks for tuning in today. The Denver Broncos mandatory mini camp is underway, Sandy. This is essentially the big one. The OTAs give you a little bit of a look at what the team might look like, and for Sean Payton in his second year, what there might be behind a new quarterback. But now that you have mandatory minicamp, you have an opportunity to at least get some football-like substance on the field with teams that can at least do a little bit of defending, a little bit of maybe more closer to two-hand touch football, but you have helmets on, you have at least a little bit of the shells, you got shoulder pads, you can get a little bit more done. When you look at minicamp in particular, and you think of this quarterback position, because that's where everything is going to stem from when you have Bo Nix selected, 12th overall pick in the draft. How long should it go on, this notion that there's a quarterback competition? Is it all the way through this mini camp? Is it into training camp? Is it into preseason? At what point does Sean Payton do what all of us know is going to happen and just say, Bo Nix is the starter until and unless proven otherwise?
Well, there haven't been many truly open practices. And as I understand it, one of the differences with this mini camp is that the practices will be viewed by outside observers. All three of them will be open entirely to the media.
Yeah, as opposed to just a viewable period.
Right. And taking their word for the fact that all three quarterbacks are getting equal amounts of work with first-team players, to the extent that they have established first-team players.
Which
I'm
Cortland
not
Sutton
sure
is
they
back.
do.
There's one.
Well, and then there's the question of how much work will Cortland Sutton get with the first team? If he gets work, will it be necessary that Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton would get some work together? But if they are intent on keeping up appearances, then perhaps he doesn't get much work with Bo Nix, because for at least appearances' sake, they're sticking to their guns on the idea that this is, relatively speaking, an open competition. Now, we'll see if the reps begin to tilt in favor of Nix over these next 3 days, because everybody will be able to watch, and perhaps even the coach will give some sense of when an announcement might come without asking him directly, when are you going to announce Bo Nix as your starting quarterback? Right. I imagine he wouldn't respond to that.
No.
But when are you going to name a number one quarterback? Because wouldn't you think that a bulk of the practice time would serve any one of the three well,
right?
If any of them,
and that's the point I would have,
happen to start
anybody
in week one, it would
Jared
be
Stidham
a benefit to any of them.
So it's not as if he would be it's not as if he's ready to go with a lot of experience with the Denver Broncos. He started 2 games last season. Bo Nix, obviously the most started college quarterback in history, 61 college starts, more than anyone else. Zach Wilson, obviously the extraordinarily high pick a couple years ago, but more of a reclamation project and a cheap lottery ticket for the Broncos in Sean Payton's case. A guy that you decide, okay, you're not going to pick up the option. You have this year. He doesn't cost much this year. And you see if you can do something with him, and maybe he's a long-term backup for you, as opposed to Stidham, who, quite frankly, Payton might have seen and decided, maybe the ceiling's already been reached, and maybe it hasn't with Wilson. But yeah, in Bo Nix's case, this is going to be his show. You don't pick a guy 12 overall. You don't move on from Russell Wilson and take an $80 million cap hit over 2 years to not start the guy that you replaced him with the 12th overall pick in the draft. But I don't worry about it at this point. Our pal Sean Keeler, who we've had on this program before from the Denver Post, has brought up the idea that sooner rather than later, it makes sense for Sean Payton
I agree
to
with
announce
that.
the starter.
And there's nothing preventing him from doing it in the first week of camp or the second week of camp before they play.
But it doesn't have to happen now.
But
it
doesn't have to happen this week. It
camp.
doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, you can say in training camp, a week of that you're like, we've seen enough. We're going with the idea that Bo Nix is going to be the starter in our first preseason game, and we'll go with it. So it's going to happen. But the idea that it's going to happen still seems to be a little bit odd around the country, right? And even a little bit here in Denver, where we've been telling you every single day, and we will. There is no quarterback controversy. Bo Nix is the Broncos starter, and he was the day he was drafted. But earlier today on Kay Adams' show over on YouTube, an interesting place to watch quality sports programming, by the way, in case you're paying attention, waving to you on camera right there. Former Bronco and Jet, at one point, Julius Thomas had a chance to sit down, talk a little bit about why he believes, and rightly so, this is Bo Nix's job, but keep a little bit of an ear out for what Kay Adams talks about, because there's still the idea, the narrative, that there might be a quarterback controversy. People just can't quite quit it.
How much better will they be than last year?
So that's a hard question to answer, because he's a rookie quarterback. But I predict, again, hear it here first, this is just my opinion, but I think that Bo Nix is going to have a great season this year. I think he was the type of quarterback that I wanted to see in Sean Payton's system. I mean, for him to be able to go to Auburn, to Oregon, and to be able to learn a complex offense, execute at a high level, accurate passer, and I'm not the statistician, and I'm sure somebody on your team can help us out more, but he doesn't seem that different in size and stature from a really good quarterback that Sean Payton has had before.
Now, Julius Thomas, are you saying that Bo Nix is the week one starter? Because there's a lot of hype around the Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be Bo Nix. I do think so.
Can you expand on that? Why him? Because there is a lot of steam that it's going to be Zach Wilson. Why do you think Sean will use Bo instead of Zach?
Well, one of the things that I did for a good portion of my life was catch passes. And if you ask a pass catcher, what's the most important thing? It's accuracy. And if you've got one of the most accurate quarterbacks sitting in that backfield, you're going to want that guy to be throwing the ball. I mean, I got a chance to watch him play a couple of times at Oregon this year. And I mean, he was on the money with that ball placement. And that's huge in the NFL.
One, we don't have a laugh track for this show yet. Maybe we'll need to get one. There is no steam around Zach Wilson as the starter for the Denver Broncos.
In fact, there is just the opposite. The reports have been that Zach Wilson has been terrible in these workouts. And believe me, as someone who puts little or no stock in these workouts, it is very rare to see any kind of negative review from anyone regarding a quarterback's performance in OTAs, and yet Zach Wilson has broken the mold.
You're in shorts
in that area. He is one among one, a quarterback who's been negatively reviewed in OTAs. At least here in Denver, I've never heard of such a thing. I have heard Paxton Lynch celebrated. I have heard the biggest stiffs, and the Broncos have many of them down through the years, especially during their AFL days, but at times in the NFL too. I have never heard, not one time before Zach Wilson, any quarterback be reviewed negatively. His interceptions are talked about constantly. His completions are never talked about these days. And I would anticipate the same would be true this week. If there is any slight chance that someone other than Bo Nix will be the starting quarterback in week one, it would be Jared Stidham's chance and not Zach Wilson. So Kay Adams, in fairness, went on to say she's New York-based, and so naturally she'll hear more about Zach Wilson, but I would dare her to find a single scrap of evidence that suggests that Wilson is pushing either Nix or Stidham. Wilson will be doing very well to make the team.
Yeah, Wilson's ceiling on this team, I want to be really clear about this, is that perhaps if things go well, the Denver Post, by the way, the OTS, the report you were talking about, the term they used was rattled in 11-11 drills. Rattled.
How do you get rattled in 11-on-11 drills?
I don't know. But Wilson's
I've never heard that
just
either.
so everyone knows the theme. Zach Wilson's ceiling is that he somehow beats Jared Stidham out as the backup quarterback. That's the max. That's the maximum for Zach Wilson. That's it. Period. This is essentially his last chance to stick in the NFL. And if he doesn't beat out Stidham, which is a possibility, quite frankly, in this case, because he's on his rookie deal, he's cheaper than Stidham. He may not be any worse than Stidham. And so as a result, they might look at it and say, okay, he could be our backup for a year. It's a rebuild year anyway. Let's see what happens. I can envision that. But no, he's not going to be the starter. Julius Thomas brought up a couple good points. I mean, one talked about stature and everything. Well, Bo Nix is legitimately 6'3". Drew Brees was 6 foot.
Maybe
in cleats.
Maybe.
And as someone who's kind of the same, I get it. But Drew Brees, Nix is bigger. Nix is 15 to 20 pounds bigger, plays bigger, taller guy. But the point that he made about accuracy is the point. One of the things that we fought, and it's interesting to bring Wilson into this discussion. Zach Wilson, and I remember you and I talked about this at the time the draft combine came around, and Zach Wilson, indoors at Lucas Oil Stadium, took a snap against nobody, by the way, as it happens in a combine, rolled around to the outside and threw across his body about 60 yards in the air and hit a receiver who is uncovered and basically fielding a punt. So your catch radius is somewhat larger at that point in time, but still an impressive physical throw. The Jets, like it seems like one or two teams every year did, fall for that and go, oh my gosh, big, strong arm. We got to get him. The average depth of target in the NFL has dropped every year for the last 4 years as teams emphasize accuracy, precision, and timing. And if you think that's out of the ordinary, was Peyton Manning known for his, despite the commercials, laser rocket arm? No, accuracy and timing. Drew Brees, big arm, accuracy and timing. Tom Brady, accuracy and timing. If you'd like to see where they are, just go look at the top yardage and touchdown passers in the history of the league. It's always been about accuracy and timing. The athletes in the NFL are the best of the best. The windows are small and they're not open for long. It's not about whether you can rocket it in. Even John Elway had to learn touch. That's what the separator is in the NFL. Ignore the arm strength. Can you get it there on time and on target, even if it flutters, like Peyton Manning did at times?
John Elway's last 5 years were much better in terms of efficiency and accuracy than his first 5 years in the NFL. Now, you might say naturally, but that wasn't particularly true of Dan Marino. His first 5 years were better than his last 5. It wasn't true of Joe Montana. His first 5 years were a lot better than his last 5 years. It was true with John Elway. And Troy Aikman, no less an authority than Troy Aikman, has talked for years about the 3 ingredients that make a quarterback effective as being number 1, processing information, number 2, accuracy, and number 3, decision-making. Only one of those 3 involves the throwing of a football.
Right.
And that one is accuracy. It is not arm strength. It is not the number of yards you can throw the football down the field. That is nice, but some famous busts, in fact, a good many of the famous busts, from Ryan Leaf to Jamarcus Russell and many in between, Bobby Douglas back in the 70s, have rocket arms.
Jeff George,
they can throw the ball
forever
and ever and ever, but none of them were accurate. None of them had any idea where the ball was going when they threw it. And you see it in baseball with pitchers such as Sandy Koufax and to a lesser extent Nolan Ryan, whose first 5 years involved an inability to stay in a rotation because they couldn't throw strikes. But as their careers wore on, and Ryan's really did wear on all the way into his 40s, mid-40s even, you saw that Nolan Ryan was less bothered by control issues than he had been early in his career. First 5 years involved a trade from the New York Mets to the California Angels at the time. So you see that accuracy is important, particularly nowadays. And yards per pass attempt has more to do with accuracy than it does with an ability to throw deep.
Yeah. I mean, you're paying the wide receivers to get to run after the catch, do all those sort of things. That's their job. The quarterback's to get it to them on time and on target. Heck, in baseball, it's kind of why you call it a touchdown strike, isn't it? Sometimes painting the corners is the difference between winning and losing. Bo Nix, at least in college, proved that he can do that, and that's why he's going to get the shot to do it with the Denver Broncos. We'll focus a little bit more on minicamp in a moment, but of course it is getting to be beautiful weather out there. And as you can see, the Mile High Sports issues right above us there. The golf issue is out, and inside that, some very, very good reasons to get out on the links.
Well, particularly here in Denver, it's time to get out and play golf. The city of Denver has the perfect golf pass for you, whether you're just getting started or played for many, many years. The practice and play pass is for those new to the game so that these people can practice and take what they've learned, transition it onto the golf course. The Learn and Pass 1.0, Learn and Play Pass 1.0 is geared toward adult beginners, people that never held a club, or players looking to advance their game. Or if you've been playing for a while, try the 2.0 Learn and Play Pass, which is designed to be flexible for intermediate players looking to improve and fine-tune their game. Just looking to have some fun, the Friends and Family Pass lets you play mini golf or hit the driving range. You can bring up to 3 guests with you every time. 8 unique courses in the Denver metro area, opportunities for all skill levels. Denver Golf is perfect for anyone and everyone. Learn more about everything Denver Golf has to offer by visiting cityofdenvergolf.com. Come home to play, because Denver Golf is your neighborhood course.
Well, the Broncos are back at minicamp. Minicamp happening today. Practice is already wrapped up. It will happen on Wednesday. It'll wrap up on Thursday. Shorter session on Thursday as well, about 2 hours shorter, as the Broncos go ahead and wrap up this week. Cortland Sutton is there. That's, of course, maybe the biggest news, and the idea that perhaps, we'll have to see, did he give up some of that leverage? We talked about that yesterday on the program, but now that you can do a little bit more. You talked at a couple minutes ago about the idea of jobs up for grabs. And in theory, it shouldn't be just the quarterbacks, right? It should be everybody. But one of the important ones here, we talk about that offensive line, the guys that will be protecting Bo Nix first and foremost. Well, 4 of those 5 seem to be absolutely set. In left tackle, Garrett Bowles; in left guard, Ben Powers; in right guard, Quinn Miners, who may take a leap to the Pro Bowl this year; and in right tackle, Mike McGlinchey. And the Broncos hope that Powers and McGlinchey in their second season with the team will be better. The center will be different. Lloyd Cushenberry III moves along in free agency, gets a nice raise, good for him. And now the Broncos kind of put that up for grabs. PJ Mustipher is part of that, worked with the Ravens for a while. And then a couple of youngsters, including Alex Forsythe, who briefly overlapped with Nix in Oregon, the 7th rounder from a year ago. But how critical is it for a center to get a relationship with these quarterbacks fast? Is it sort of the situation where if you don't find that center pretty quick, the weakest link in the chain breaks the whole thing down?
The center job is really up for grabs. That's no
truly up for grabs.
That's no charade. The quarterback competition is a charade, just as it was with Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock back in 2022.
Right.
And really, just as it was in the supposedly competitive season of 2017 between Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch at that time.
And Mark Sanchez briefly.
And Mark Sanchez.
Which was always not ever a thing.
Which was destined to fail from the beginning. That was a 2016 deal. And maybe that's the one exception to the Zach Wilson rule, because Mark Sanchez was acquired from Philadelphia, and basically from the first day, at least of training camp, didn't look as good as the rookie Paxton Lynch, who probably did have his best training camp in his rookie year, but certainly Sanchez was never a threat to start because of what happened during training camp, maybe more so during training camp than during OTAs or the mini camp that year. But there is a competition at center. And again, you would think Forsythe, having played with Nix, might have an edge, but until you name Nix officially as the starter,
there's no
then you're rotating centers and you're rotating quarterbacks.
Right.
And that probably isn't a good idea if it is something that unfolds throughout the course of training camp.
Yeah, 3 different centers in play. Of course, we talked about Mustafa, the addition this year, and Forsyth, but don't forget about Luke Wattenberg, the 5th round selection back in 2022 out of Washington that they like a lot. And it really does feel in many ways to probably be a completely open competition. I don't think there's anything in which you look at any of the 3 bodies of work and say that Mustafa, who's been in the league 2 years longer out of Notre Dame, has a massive
but he doesn't
inherent
know
advantage. Right. He doesn't know the offense.
And Forsyth does, and Wattenberg does.
Right. So I really think that one is open, and it's something to watch when you look at the quarterback situation, to be sure. But now that there can be some interaction in this minicamp format, how much value did he get out of this for the players? I know it's only a couple days, but it is mandatory for a reason. You can do more than you can for a reason, but they take a big old break after this. How much of this really impacts, and it sounds strange to question it this way, Sandy, but what in minicamp, if anything, gets carried into the regular season, or is what you get at minicamp simply carried into training camp, and then training camp might as well never have happened?
Well, yes, I think maybe there's some carryover because there's some installation going on right now between minicamp and training camp. I don't think there's any correlation between minicamp and what we might see at the start of the regular season. I really don't. I mean, I think there's still going to be a fairly, maybe egalitarian is not quite the right word, but fairly egalitarian in the way they practice and open up competition. And part of the problem that the Broncos have is, if anything, there's too much competition for too many spots.
Well, that's what happens when you're a bad team, right?
And quarterback, strangely enough, even with a rookie involved, is one of the few positions in which there is little to no doubt as to who the starter is going to be. Tight end, no idea, except that seemingly Kroll has been praised by Peyton more than the other tight ends, and Greg Dulcich up to now, and I don't know what happened today, but Dulcich during OTAs was working apart from the team on a side field.
Right. Lucas Kroll, very interesting. Yeah, because prior to the beginning of minicamp, Peyton said, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but people will know more about Lucas Kroll very soon.
He said that's what he told Kroll.
Right. And he came along at the end of last year. And the funny thing is, look, if you're Lucas Kroll, for example, one, the tight end position in a Sean Payton offense is really important. It's really important for any sort of offense in modern football today. It's kind of the security blanket for a quarterback. And now you have an opportunity in which, quite frankly, as long as you can do the job and remain healthy, you have a leg up on everybody. Adam Troutman did, I think, a serviceable job. He did, quite frankly, what you'd expect out of a journeyman vet. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't necessarily do anything special. He was reliable, but he wasn't anybody that the defense worried about. Kroll is a little faster, a little bigger, and sometimes these things happen. You run into talents that once you get them a chance to blossom, they can. Julius Thomas, who we heard from not that long ago, was one of them. Prior to that, you think of Antonio Gates, guys that sometimes they have to get their look. And Kroll didn't come from basketball like Thomas and Gates did. But some guys do blossom at the level and they get overlooked. And especially in college, where tight end, when we talk about the explosiveness, say wide receiver, right? And you see that translate, or the explosiveness at running back, you see that translate. Tight end, for the most part, is not one of those positions in modern college offenses, which are so spread and maybe even closer to what you used to seeing in the Arena League than you see in the NFL. Tight ends in college can be a little harder to pluck and understand how they're going to translate from the college ranks to the NFL. So I look at a Lucas Kroll and think, hey, you know what? Maybe there is a chance that he might be a surprise for them, because it really is hard to tell how these guys will translate, because college offenses just don't use tight ends in the same way that NFL teams do.
No, but you have somebody in this division, a rookie tight end named Brock Bowers.
Yeah, and you have another one that's pretty famous. It's got to
play anywhere.
Famous
and
girlfriend.
Travis Kelce.
Oh yeah, that guy
is the best. but he can't move around like Bowers can. He can't play him at different spots in quite the same way. Now you can run different stuff with him, and I suppose you can line him up, but I really think Bowers is going to be a terrific addition.
Oh, I do too.
For the Raiders. Kelsey is who he is. Kelsey's the best in the game. Now there may be some decline now that he's in his mid-30s. He doesn't get quite the amount of usage, but I think versatility is important at that position now, maybe more so than ever. And I don't see it with the Broncos. I don't see one guy who is established as both a receiver and a blocker.
No.
I don't see a single tight end on this roster who's established that way. And I suppose you can say Bowers hasn't played a game, and so he's not established. But you saw what he did at Georgia.
Yes.
For the time he was there, Georgia was probably the best team in college football.
Certainly.
Even though they were not national champions in 2023.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And I think that's one of the guys that you do look at and say, sure, that's a player that you know how they should be able to function. I do get that. But yeah, it becomes interesting to see how that could shake out, because if you do look at the kind of offenses that maybe you can use a tight end, and you have to go back, and Lucas Kroll was not a star, but if you're thinking of teams that do use the tight end in a fashion where they have to block, right? Which that's the one part. You look at a Bowers and he can do the whole thing, but you see a lot of tight ends come out of the draft and they can run and they can do all that sort of stuff. And they're really just big receivers, and that's okay, but you can't do as much with that. You've watched, for example, as talented as he is, you've watched Atlanta sort of struggle with what to do with Kyle Pitts, who's extraordinarily talented, but as a blocker is way behind the curve.
Yes.
But Lucas Kroll, in case you maybe didn't know much about him, came from Pitt. Yeah. Pitt needs you to block. So you have a guy
when you
that's...
think of Pitt tight ends, you think of Mike Ditka.
Right.
He's the first great receiving tight end in the history of the NFL.
Right.
The early 1960s.
But you think about that year out of Pitt in which he was second team all ACC back in 2021, started 11 of them, 6 touchdowns. Then think of that offense in which he played in. His quarterback was Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
Kenny Pickett, of course, however you feel about his pro prospects, obviously even the Steelers don't love them, but he got picked where he did because he was a productive, effective quarterback. He is. And I think he's one of the guys that I'm really looking at. Now, obviously, there are rookies. We look at a Chris Abrams-Drain, who we've talked about, mid-round pick for the Broncos, that has an opportunity to maybe start opposite Pat Surtain, who's in line for a big contract extension. More about that a little later as we go along through this offseason. But I do look at the opportunity that if Dulcich's, I don't even know if Dulcich's health matters, because Sean Payton didn't bring him in. It would be helpful, but I think while fans look at it and go, when will Greg Dulcich show? When will that guy that we saw in blips and fits and starts show up? I think Sean Payton looks at it and goes, I didn't even know who that was. I didn't bring him in. I don't know if I care. All he sees is a guy that hasn't been able to get on the field, and Kroll has. For Payton, that might be it. I think that's one of the disconnects where fans look at it and think there must be something that's important that I'm not sure the head coach does. And we may learn more about this in the second year under Sean Payton, that because the overturn of this roster has been so significant, it's easy to miss that even though fans are still thinking about some young players and how they might perform, Damari Mathis, maybe another one of those, who had certainly a fast start, to Sean Payton, it's a guy that was here when I got here.
And did not distinguish himself last year, and was a starter at the beginning of the year, as I recall.
Yes, he was.
But
got chewed up,
got beaten out. And, it's hard to play opposite Surtain, but
Jaquan McMillan came out of nowhere and did it pretty well.
Well, he's more of a slot guy. And they still need a second cornerback who can cover on the outside.
They signed Levi Wallace.
I think of all the candidates, the least likely to start is Damari Mathis, although he's mentioned as this is going to be our catchphrase. I guarantee you, because I've seen it dozens of times already. In this camp, in the mix.
In the mix
to start.
Everybody
in the mix. Everybody's in the mix.
Everybody's in the mix. That's the nature of this time of year for sure, including a whole bunch of very interesting names and titles for the Utah NHL team, which we'll get to in a minute with our guest. But I would remind you, talk about in the mix. You don't want to be in the mix when you are selling your home, the most valuable thing you own. You want to stand out. You want your home to sell. You want it to sell for what it's worth, and you want it to sell quickly. And if you want that, then you need to talk to my friends David and Mark at Key Real Estate Group's Colorado Luxury Home Team. You hear Luxury Home Team, what you're really hearing about is the service. It doesn't matter if it's a condo. It doesn't matter if it's a castle, if it's everything in between. When you are selling or you're buying, you will get the top service, the personal touch that Dave and Mark at Key Real Estate Group can bring to you. They're experts that know Colorado's market. They've had more than 25 years in the exact same offices. That's some good real estate decisions right there. And they know how to ride all the highs and lows. Stable and experienced. That's what you want when you are putting your most valuable asset up for sale. Now, you know that inventory is still low around the Denver area. And now that it's warming up outside, all sorts of people are going to be out there looking, and you need to stand out. That also means your home needs to be priced right to sell fast. So let Dave and Mark give you a free valuation. Now that summer is feeling like it's right here already and the folks are out there shopping, there's no reason to wait. You need to make that decision, and you need to make it quickly. So go find the right people, and that's Dave and Mark at Key Real Estate Group's Colorado Luxury Home Team. Here's how you get a hold of them. Call Dave and Mark at the Key Real Estate Group at 720-900-LIST. That's 720-900-LIST, or visit them online today at keyrealestategroup.com. Over in the NHL, Sandy, the former Arizona Coyotes, which were already the former Phoenix Coyotes, are now going to play in Utah next year. The expansion, which isn't really an expansion, feels just a move. The group that owns the Jazz and plays in the Delta Center, they obtained the Coyotes. Now, Arizona's trying to keep the rights in case there's some sort of expansion for the Coyotes coming back at some point, to which I wish you all very good luck. But interesting stuff's happened with Utah. 11,000 season ticket deposits were sold. Not a shock there. Salt Lake City is actually a great winter sports town, and we know they support the Jazz very well, and they have a great facility in which to play it. They will play their first season just as Utah. Just going to say Utah across their jerseys. They're not going to have official colors. They're not going to have anything. That all comes from the into the 25-26 season. But they have been holding a fan vote on how they're going to name the teams. And more than 500,000 people have voted. And over at Mile High Sports, our friend Danilo Piro, who's joining us here to talk about it, notice that there's, how do we put it? Some interesting coincidences in the choices that the Utah organization has made. How's it going, Danilo?
What's going on, gentlemen? And yeah, very interesting coincidences. And I also want to say this for the listener out there before we talk about this hockey stuff. You need to listen to Sean and Sandy talk about this, and I'm using air quotes here, Broncos quarterback competition. I just got back from minicamp, and I'm telling you, there is no competition, which is exactly what you guys have been saying for quite some time. There is no competition. It's Bo Nix's job to lose.
Never was.
Put it that way. Right. But yeah, and so I saw the 6 finalist names for the Utah Hockey Club, whatever they're going to call them. That's actually one of the finalists for the names here.
I actually like it, just like I like the Washington
football
team. Football team. Call them the football team. I thought that was fine. I don't know why they ever changed it, and they don't seem to be thrilled with the nickname they have now. I'd like the Utah team to be Utah Hockey Club.
Yeah, Utah HC, one of the names that they might be going with.
I like it too.
Yeah, that's one of the only ones that doesn't feel like it's cribbed from the state of Colorado. Right. Here's the other ones that have more 500,000 votes that have been trimmed down. And by the way, Sandy knows this history with the Avs as well, or better than I do. But remember, the Avalanche at one point, before they were the Avalanche, had a big contest. Was held in part with the Denver Post on fan votes to name the team. And as you know full well, one of the things that's kind of funny about it is the owners at the time, which was ComSat and with a little bit of help from Ascent, actually behind the scenes had an idea to have this poll and then ignore it entirely because the internal marketing people in the 1990s liked the name Rocky Mountain Extreme. which was literally spelled Xtreme. And we're thinking of ignoring the whole fan contest. So take that with a grain of salt. And by the way, there's one of those names in here. I'll go over it. But one, we went over Utah HC. Okay, that's fine. Utah Blizzard is one of them. Guys, the NHL is not going to approve the name Blizzard when the Colorado Avalanche is literally almost like overlapping in media market. It's not going to happen. So there's that one. Here's the other ones. The Utah Mammoth. Heard that somewhere? That's even owned by the same team, by the same group as the Avalanche.
Yep.
The Utah Outlaws, the Denver outdoor lacrosse team, is the Outlaws. The Utah Venom, Utah, well known for its massive collection of dangerous snakes, I guess. That's their version of the Rocky Mountain Extreme. And then the last is the Utah Yeti. Rest in peace, Howler. But for decades, there was a Yeti footprint.
Maybe Howler will come back
the,
from the dead, though.
Maybe. I mean, maybe that's a little bit of pressure. But Anil, you had it pegged. You looked at all these and you had texted me saying, like, wait a minute, like almost all of these look like they're swiped from Colorado teams.
Yeah, and it's like I saw the initial social post on Instagram from the ESPN account, and I went in there and I commented from the Mile High Sports Instagram, and I was basically like, 4 of these 6 names have like direct ties to Colorado sports. And then I get, all the Utah fans, our mountains are better. Oh, it's different markets, this and that. But the reality situation is, and I think you hit the nail on the head here as well, Sean, is they're neighboring markets. And it's one thing if it was an expansion team in Atlanta when they were the Thrashers, or some team on the West Coast like Seattle all those years back, maybe those names come back into play. But when you're talking about teams that are going to be playing in the same time zone, they can cross state lines, relatively easy. I mean, there are neighbors. And so I just thought it was interesting because the Colorado sports fan knows the Denver Outlaws, knows the Mammoth, knows the Yeti, to your point about Howler. So maybe the outside fans, outside of Utah and Colorado, don't understand the nature of these names. But I was a little taken aback that 4 of the 6 finalist names for whatever the Utah Hockey Club, which I love, by the way, is going to be, have direct ties to Colorado sports. So I don't know which way they're going to go, but if they use any of those 4, I do think the Colorado sports fan, look, and I know it's the outdoor lacrosse in general, not nearly as big as the NHL, right? But at the end of the day, they do have a little bit of a claim to these names. And so I'm just curious to see which direction they go. I think Venom's a cool name. As I said earlier, I love the traditional classic look of Hockey Club as well, but 4 of the 6 direct ties to Colorado sports.
Yeah. And of course, isn't it true that the 2 teams meet to open the season? That the Avalanche first game?
I think you might be right about that, Mr.
Yeah, I think that maybe
Utah.
Well, I mean, you'd want, let's face it, if you do the NHL, you'd like to start building a regional rivalry.
Absolutely.
Of course you would.
It's the rivalry you want.
Sometimes it works, and sometimes, like when CU and Utah go to the Pac-12, it doesn't. But I mean, you can give it a try. But it is kind of fascinating because the way that's been received in Utah too. They've had a lot of fans have had some of the questions that we've had. Look, Colorado, it's not hard. Anil, you're from here. I'm from here. Colorado flag is everywhere. Centennial State. Everyone is pretty proud of their state. In Utah, it's known as the Beehive State. And they're really proud of that. Some of the names in there was the Utah Hive. There were things that were related to bees. For a long time, the minor league baseball team was the Salt Lake Buzz. That's a big part of it. And there are a lot of folks that are from Utah going, well, where's the stuff that would make it Utah? It's just sort of general snow for the most part, except for Venom. And that's where I kind of look at this and think, boy, I wonder if we're going to see a situation where that's a nice fan vote. And we're going to name it this anyway in the end.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And I think to your point, Sean, like, I don't want to say it's lazy, the names that they've come up with, but like you immediately draw the thoughts of snow. And look, I know Salt Lake City, I know the Utah Jazz and all that kind of stuff. But when I think about the state of Utah as a whole, I probably think about like Moab and the deserts and the snakes and the canyons and all that other stuff.
Yeah, there's your Venom.
Yeah, exactly. Like as much as I think about the mountains with them. And so maybe the NHL and the ownership group, maybe they want to lean into, Yeti or Blizzard and try to build some familiarity and some rivalry with the Avalanche here. But I also just don't think that's fair to the Utah sports fan, because it's like, if you're going to have a hockey club, if you're going to have a new team come in, and the more I talk about this, I really like Utah Hockey Club. But like, if you're going to bring these guys in, you don't want to, have to play little brother to your neighbors next door in Colorado. Like, I don't know. I just think it'd be very unoriginal. These names are already in use. And And frankly, if you're going to move this team to Utah, you want them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, something that they're known for as close to exclusively as they could be. And I just think, like, while the name Blizzard or Yeti are cool, like, all you're going to do is cause problems with the Colorado Avalanche and the NHL, who are one of, if not, one of the best teams in hockey right now. So it's not like you're looking at a bottom feeding team, right, that hasn't been good, and maybe you can kind of stick your foot in the door. Like, the Avalanche are on top right now. They're a very competitive team in the league. I just think leeching off of some of that familiarity just would not be a good start for a franchise that plays in the state next door.
We're talking to Mile High Sports and Neil Piero, and Neil, you make a good point, because some of the names that didn't make the cut, the Utah Canyons, right? You think of the national parks there. I think that's kind of unique and interesting. We talked about the Beehive. The Utah Hive was one of those. The Utah Swarm was one of those. Those aren't terribly bad names either. And the other one I thought that was pretty creative, especially because there is some competition between Colorado and Utah in skiing. The Utah Black Diamonds was an interesting idea as well. So I look at it, think some of the creative ones that actually, even as sitting here and watching a neighboring team, I'm like, some of those might have been pretty cool and felt more Utah. And you're right. It feels like not only did they pick the generic one, they picked existing teams from a neighboring state, in which, quite frankly, especially when you talk about like the Mammoth or the Outlaws, there might be fans in Utah of the Mammoth and the Outlaws, given that they're the closest actual teams in those leagues.
And I haven't spent much time in Utah. Obviously I've been in Colorado for a long time, but like, am I thinking Outlaws when I think of Utah? Am I thinking Mammoth when I think of Utah? Like Yeti, okay, I guess I can kind of understand that, right? With the mountains.
Anywhere that's not the Himalayas is pushing it. So yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just like, I look at these names and I'm like, none of them really scream Utah to me, like whatsoever. I never heard that Black Diamonds one though. That would be kind of a funky name. Maybe there's like an alternate jersey that they can use with like the double Black
there's so
Diamond
many creative
logo.
things you could do.
But,
I
just, like I said, my big point is it takes a lot of work to move a team from another market, right? You might as well make it feel fresh. You might as well make it feel new. And sure, to the 48 other states and those that watch the NHL abroad, like they're going to have no idea of the connection, but like it just seems like a recipe for disaster. If you're going to try to separate two brand identities by leeching off of the identity of the other one, if that were via the Avalanche with the Yeti or the Blizzard or the Mammoth, whatever it might be. So I just hope they come up with something creative, because like I said, people in 48 states aren't going to really care, but it is one of those situations where, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a comparison. There's not one off the top of my head that I can think of right now, but like, it just doesn't seem like a good decision to lean into the winter sports nature that the Avalanche have already kind of captured as their own. They just won a Stanley Cup like less than 3 years ago as well. So it's like, you're talking about a team that's relevant and a talking point already.
Yeah. And apart from all that, I think this is one, however belated, that the NHL got right. I think the league will be a lot stronger. The West will be stronger with a team in Utah as opposed to anywhere in Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And there were a lot of sites
suggested
as being the best fit. There's no question that in Salt Lake, the NHL will do as well as it has done in Seattle and, of course, in Las Vegas.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, they had to get out of Arizona. I do feel bad for some of the fans out there.
Should have been done years ago.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was just a train wreck, and so we'll see what happens there. I mean, the Coyotes is honestly a great name, and I understand why Arizona wants to kind of keep that, or the NHL, however they're going to play that out, in hopes that franchise comes back. But even as we're talking here, like, I don't know, like you could do like Huskies, you could do like, there's a lot of different ways to play off snow and mountains and cold than just like Blizzard, right? I mean, Blizzard is just the other form of Avalanche,
That's nothing for me. That's nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think I maybe even speak for some Avalanche fans. I want it to do well, because I would love the idea, ever since the 90s, since the early 2000s, since the Red Wings were moved to the Eastern Conference, that really good rivalry hasn't materialized. For a while, it felt like it was Minnesota, and then it didn't quite spark up.
Minnesota.
It feels like maybe with Vegas, it could spark up a little bit. But I think if you especially had now teams in Vegas, in Salt Lake, in Denver, there is a really cool little locus of energy that the NHL could tap into if these teams were good at the same time. And as a result, you really want these teams to all feel very different. It's better for the league in general. I think they're made the right choice in Utah. But yeah, this feels a little weird. Now, granted, the Avs did not go with Rocky Mountain Extreme, thank goodness. And maybe Utah will get a little more creative as it comes along. But yeah, this one, sort of borrowing the ideas is one thing. Borrowing the ideas from the neighboring state, just sort of weird. But, toddlers' first steps are wobbly, and this is the first crack for the NHL in Utah.
Maybe to play a little devil's advocate, though. Maybe can you spark a rivalry a little bit quicker by naming them something that's familiar to the Avalanche, piss off the Avalanche fan base? Imagine if it's like, yeah, we're the Utah Yeti. And it's like, well, you got the Avalanche fan with the Howler footprint on the jersey and all that kind of stuff. So That's the psychological way that I think of it, is maybe like they want to try to inject some bad blood, or inject a little bit of friendly rivalry about who claims what, So I don't know. I like Venom. I think Venom's a kind of a cool name. I think it's unique. As I've said now 4 times, I think Hockey Club is another cool option as well. And I think maybe it's a little spoiled on the Colorado sports fan of like, hey, like we own Avalanche, which means we should probably own, these other snow related ideas or names or whatnot. But like, if I'm like a WWE matchmaker, you almost want that in a way where it's like, how do we inject some juice into this team right away? You're talking about the lack of a rival on a consistent basis for the Avalanche. That would be one way to do it. All in all, though, I think, Sandy, you made the great point. This is a good market for them to move to. I think whether it's Venom, Hockey Club, Blizzard, Yeti, I do think there'll be some rivalry that's brewed between these two teams. And nice to get another sports team in the Mountain Time Zone, because it's basically the Colorado sports team and the Utah Jazz. So welcome Utah hockey team, whatever they're going to be named.
Yeah, and they've already kept the Jazz name, even though that makes no sense from New Orleans. They certainly can't keep the Coyotes. It'll really be a mismatched, weird world in Utah. Neil Apure from Mile High Sports. Thanks so much. A little bit of good-natured ribbing between the bordering states isn't a bad thing, and I guess we'll find out how that extends over the next year. But Utah will start next fall, just as Utah, and they will figure it out from there. We're going to take a look, go from hockey to basketball, and go from the local parts all the way to France in a moment. But I want to remind you that as the weather gets nice outside and you're thinking of maybe holding events outside, maybe you're thinking of a party, got barbecue, play badminton, croquet. I still play badminton, croquet when I'm invited. I mean, I'll go out there and do that for sure. But you get hungry and you want to entertain. Well, now that warmer weather is here, you get outside, you have fun with family and friends, but you don't want to be in the kitchen cooking and putting all that together, because then, hey, what? You can't, go smoke everybody a badminton. So of course you want to go ahead and find a way where you can entertain, keep everybody fed and happy with something they'll enjoy that keeps you out of the kitchen. And that's where Rolling Smoke BBQ comes in. Whether you have a half dozen folks, maybe you're just even grabbing something from your family after work, or you're getting 50 or more, you can pick up the best barbecue in town from one of Rolling Smoke's 4 locations. You name it, barbecue wise, they've got it. The smoked turkey is amazing. Get your order in early. I'll tell you how to do that in a minute because it goes fast. The honey bourbon sausage, a favorite of mine. 4 different locations where you can find it in Aurora, inside the Stanley Marketplace. That's the first place. If you're in there, just follow your nose. You will find it right in dead center Stanley Marketplace, that Rolling Smoke. Because of that growth, now it's in Golden, inside the Golden Mill, at the corner of Dry Creek and University and Centennial. That's where I end up grabbing it. It's nearest right here to Mile High Sports. And the newest location is up on 38th Avenue in Wheat Ridge. And if you want to just give it a try and you're at one of those concerts up at Red Rocks, you can get Rolling Smoke up at Red Rocks as well. So skip the hot dogs, skip the regular snacks when you're up there getting hungry. Get yourself some top quality barbecue. And then when you come back from the show in Red Rocks, you can enjoy it at any of those great 4 locations. It's Rolling Smoke BBQ. You can find it online and order there as well at rollingSmokeBBQ.com. Sandy, we know that in the off season for the Denver Nuggets, obviously fatigue is a problem. Even Michael Malone, at the post-mortem conference at the end of the season, pointed out that fatigue was an issue for the Denver Nuggets. We all saw it. This year is an Olympic year. We know that Jamal Murray will be playing for Canada, naturally. Now it appears that Nikola Jokic, who won a silver medal in 2016 in Rio with Serbia, is going to play for Serbia again. Listed on the roster yesterday when Serbia released it. It is preliminary. Obviously, any of them are preliminary at this point, because until you actually start the tournament, some people can be substituted in. Once the Olympic tournament starts, even if there's an injury, you can't have subs.
Right.
But Jokic being on the roster is notable because Jokic, if he did not want to play, would have let Serbia know that he's not going to play and don't put him on the roster. That's what happened in the most recent Olympics. So presumably, Jokic is back. And we know that not only is that great for Serbia, again, silver medal last time he played in 2016, but do you worry a little bit about fatigue for Jokic or the fact that they were bounced out of the second round and have a little bit of a break and they don't play the tournament until the end of July? Is that enough for you to feel comfortable?
If the Nuggets are in the NBA Finals against the Celtics and still playing,
I don't think I do not think Jokic
would. Finals
would take it.
He wouldn't do it.
I don't think so.
I don't think he'd do it. But given the additional 6 weeks, as it turns out, basically 6 weeks.
And unlike Murray, he's not nursing an injury.
Right.
It's just fatigue.
Right. It's just fatigue, and he's got 6 weeks to get over it. And we know from what we've heard about his lifestyle, especially in the off season, that he's not playing a lot of basketball.
He was doing some whitewater river rafting.
Yeah.
People could find that on social media.
But nothing that
watching
would
horse races
require a tremendous amount of exertion physically on his part.
And to my mind is good. Rest up, big man.
Listen, psychologically, I worry about that as much as anything. I think he will be refreshed by the time the Olympics start, and I see no drawback to his participating in the Olympics, nor do I see a drawback for even Jamal Murray, who sometimes plays when perhaps he shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. That part is interesting to me because, I worry more about Murray than Jokic. Obviously, Jokic is going to be the centerpiece of the Serbian team, the 3-time NBA MVP.
Murray will have more help.
There's a couple guys on there. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Right.
There's a few. We went over the Canadian team about a week and a half ago, and they haven't qualified. They didn't qualify for the last Olympics. They did for this one, and they're bringing some heat here for sure. There are some familiar NBA players on that Serbian roster. Bogdan Bogdanovic is there. Alexei Pokashevsky is there. Nikola Jovic is also there. Micic from Charlotte, the Serbian coach Svetislav Pecic is familiar with Jokic, and Jokic is familiar with him. But the last time Jokic played internationally was the Eurobasket tournament back in 2022, and then that silver medal in the 2016 Olympics. It is, I actually really, after now, watching Jokic prior to those last Olympics and this Olympics, I'm actually really happy for him and excited to see how he plays and how the Serbian team reacts to him, because we're talking about from 2016, in which they won a silver medal, and Nikola Jokic.
But he wasn't Nikola Jokic.
He wasn't that guy. He wasn't the 3-time MVP. Now he is, and you know how important this is for him. I'm actually really looking forward to watching Serbia in this tournament and watching what Jokic does against international competition, including a U.S. team that is pretty stacked and the Canadian one with his very good friend Jamal Murray.
Yes, and there's absolutely no controversy, as there seems to be here, and we'll talk about this as we go along a little later about selection for USA basketball teams, not with respect to the men, obviously, but the women. Here, there's no question they'd love to have him play. He does like to play for his country.
Yep.
It's different if the NBA season more or less runs directly into the Olympics. But for the Nuggets, it does not.
If you were curious about the U.S. team, by the way, I'll give you that basically in alphabetical order. Bam Adebayo, Devin Booker, Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, Anthony Edwards, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Halliburton, Jrue Holiday, presuming he's not too tired winning a championship, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, and Jason Tatum, maybe the same thing. Like I said, that a couple of those can sub out prior to the tournament beginning, but that's where they stand in that U.S. squad, by the way. 11 Olympic appearances, 10 Olympic gold medals, 3 FIBA World Cup titles, 12 NBA All-Stars, 4 NBA MVPs, and 6 NBA champions to Paris. That is a really, really good team assembled by the basketball board of directors and the managing director, a guy who would know a little bit about that one, Grant Hill. So there might be a really good Olympic basketball tournament on tap in this Olympics. And again, it just reminds how impactful that dream team was when the Olympics allowed professionals to play. because that tour, it is no longer, you can ask Carmelo Anthony about it, he'll tell you, LeBron James too. It is no longer a given the U.S. just wins international tournaments anymore because the game has exploded so much in the style of game. Look at the best players in the league. Jokic, Giannis, Luka. None of those guys are American. Gilgeous-Alexander, Canadian. The game went out to the world, and the world is now bringing a game to the NBA that the NBA, the American NBA, actually has to adjust to. That to me is fascinating.
Absolutely. And I don't know that there has been, maybe with the possible exception of Golden State, a championship team of recent vintage that does not have at least an element of international play,
certainly was,
and influence
Denver
on how the team
Milwaukee,
operates.
Of course. Yeah.
Maybe it extends into the front office or on the coaching staff more than it does in the player ranks. But I think even Golden State became progressive organization as it is, has gradually become more international.
Well, yeah, and especially we think about the loss, the very tragic loss of Dejan Milojevic, who obviously Nikola Jokic knew very, very well, and he passed away earlier this year, unfortunately, and that was a Serbian player and coach and a major part of Steve Kerr's staff at Golden State, that the international influence is very real in the NBA, and looking forward to this Olympics, where especially when you look at the Nuggets, when you look at the Milwaukee Bucks, these are some of the teams that have won the whole thing since the last Olympics. And so that international impact on the NBA is even larger. And I think that makes this competition, this might be the best international tournament ever. It really might be. And coming off an NBA finals, which might end up being really, really ugly, this might be the show this year in basketball globally. And I'm glad Nikola Jokic is part of it. And I'm glad Jamal Murray is a part of it. And the Nuggets are important, and fatigue is all well and good. But when you have a chance to play for your country, of course you take it. Of course you do.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't even think the Nugget organization would.
You haven't heard a peep accept anything but support.
No. And I don't think that's just a public stance that's contradicted by what they really feel privately. I think there's an alignment there that, it could be very good for the Nugget players who will be involved to have that chance to play in a championship tournament,
right?
Which is what the Olympics
a very real one, obviously very exciting. The tournament will start July 28th in Paris. And as we mentioned, we will talk a little bit more about the women's team in a moment. First, we'll turn our attention to the the hits have gone silent for the Rockies on the road. We'll get to that in a moment, because sometimes when you're moving from altitude to the road, it can be in your head. And then when things are in your head, sometimes you just got to get your thinking right. And to do that, well, we have our friend, Dr. Rick Perea.
Our associate, our colleague, the good doctor, Dr. Rick Perea, someone I've known for about 11 and a half years now. And in fact, Shawn is correct. He has worked with the Colorado Rockies in the past, and that was one of his pet projects, was to try to address the psychological dimension of moving from playing at altitude to playing on the road, and moving back from the road to playing at altitude once again. And it was something that carried over into 2017 and 2018, the last two times that the Rockies have made the playoffs. Of course, Dr. Perea, best known for his full-time work with the Broncos as their chief performance psychologist in 2015. Last year, the Broncos were in the playoffs, and of course, it was a world championship season. He's worked with the 2023 NBA champion Nuggets. He has worked with high school programs, collegiate programs throughout the country. He's spoken in front of major corporate audiences, but he can help adolescents as well. He is a man for all seasons, and you can reach him very easily today by calling the following number, 720-287-0933. That's 720-287-0933. 5:03. That's Dr. Rick Perea, whose podcast can be heard live on Mile High Sports Radio every Wednesday, every Wellness Wednesday, with your weekly checkup from the neck up, live on Mile High Sports at 5:30 every Wednesday afternoon. And you can look him up at Dr. P, think14u.org. That's number 4, think1, 4u.org.
Well, Sandy, the Colorado Rockies, again, have had a difficult time on the road now. We talked about this yesterday. And the truth of the matter is they have been playing significantly better baseball than they were in April. But some of the issues, we talk about June swoons that happen every year, some of that corresponds with going on the road. And even though
they have lost 8 out of 10.
They have lost 8 out of 10. And in the last 2, even though when they were in St. Louis, they did split that series,
yes,
which is quite respectable. They lose last night against Minnesota 5-0. The problem isn't necessarily that. The problem is, even though Dakota Hudson, quite frankly, did not pitch that poorly, despite dropping to 2 and 8,
actually pitched rather well.
The Rockies have 1 run in 18 innings. That's the problem.
That's the problem. And the problem, of course, exacerbated by the loss of second baseman Brendan Rodgers. And now Diaz, the hard-hitting catcher, is going to be out, presumably for more than just a few days. Perhaps a trip to the injured list is in the offing for Elias Diaz. So the Rockies are hurting at the moment. And yes, catcher is one of the few positions where the Rockies do have some depth with a backup catcher whose offensive numbers are similar to Diaz's numbers. But yes, they are struggling. And again, we have to remind people with the Rockies that even playing half their games at Coors Field, they have 3 guys who are dangerous offensive threats. Tovar is 1, Diaz is a 2nd, McMahon is a 3rd, and even McMahon has slumped off considerably in the last few weeks, especially during this stretch in which the Rockies have lost 8 out of 10 games. Tovar and Diaz have been the constants. And while we celebrated the Amador edition on the program yesterday, he is not going to be as productive offensively as Brendan Rodgers.
Hitting at the bottom of the order yesterday, going 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. What? Not a shock. Like I pointed out, he was hitting 194 at Hartford during the call-up. I don't think he's here for the long haul. I think the Rockies know that Brendan Rodgers is going to miss some time, but I think they wanted to see Amador. We talked about it yesterday. You can always catch up on the programs at Mile High Sports over at our free app, or you can also just click and subscribe to this YouTube channel and catch yesterday's where we talked about Amador. But it's an interesting situation to be in because Elias Diaz pulled up kind of funny going on.
Well, it's the same way Rodgers got hurt,
right?
Running to first base.
And the indication is he will at least miss the rest of this Minnesota series. That's important because there are still reports out of Chicago that the Rockies and the Cubs have perhaps even engaged in trades. The Cubs have actually been kind of kicking the tires on Diaz for about 3 weeks, if not a little bit longer.
He'd be great at Wrigley
And for the
Field.
Rockies, it makes perfect sense. But obviously, when you have a guy like Diaz, and he's one of the more interesting guys in demand around the league, you got to be real careful and make sure he doesn't get hurt seriously. And that's where some of these challenges are for Bud Black, who interestingly commented about the idea that his big bats, and those who are listening can't see my air quotes with my fingers, his big bats keep dropping out. First, I was trying to figure out who those are.
Well, Diaz is a big bat.
Diaz,
so he's
one
right
of them.
about that. Rodgers with an OPS 699.
He was getting
I'm
better,
not
but
sure. I'm not sure that constitutes a big bat. But the other two definitely don't. One of those two, of course, being Chris Bryant.
right.
If that's a big bat, I hate to think what Bud Black would describe as a less than big bat.
Yeah.
If Chris Bryant is a big bat, he's making a lot of money. He's paid as if he's got a big bat, but he hasn't produced
This
that
isn't
way.
a
And
team
he
that has a
too
big
is
bat.
on the injured list.
Right. And that's a challenge. And then that forgets about last year's breakout player, Nolan Jones, who suffered a setback.
That's another one
at
who has not
Albuquerque.
been a big bat this year to
Right.
date, even when healthy for the Rockies.
But he has done that in the past. The Rockies, of course, have a tremendous amount of challenges when you're talking
Bullpen
about the way
and
this,
hitting on the road.
hitting on the
two
road
big challenges.
And obviously, when you look at some of those numbers, and we have some of those, on the screen below, the Rockies batting average as a team, 245 overall, is actually 10th in the majors, which shows actually how much things have tipped to the pitchers of late. That's the 10th best average. The Rockies at home hit 261. That's actually 4th best in all of baseball. Wasn't all that long ago where 261 for the Rockies home average would have been pretty bad, but it's still 4th best in all of baseball. But the road, again, they drop off. But if they're talking about a bright side, they dropped to 232. 232 is bad, but they're 19th in the majors. And quite frankly, Sandy, I expected them in road batting average to be worse than 19th. You surprised by that even a little? Or did you? I thought they'd be bottom 5.
I thought they'd be outside the top 20, but 19th isn't far.
No, it's not far
20.
removed from it.
And I think if you look at the on-base percentage.
Oh, yeah, you don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that
Don't
because
do that.
they're at or near the bottom of the road.
If you just ate or something, don't look at the Rockies road OPS. It's not good. Or their runs per game.
Well, they had
on the road.
6 hits last night. The problem was they were 6 singles,
Right.
not a single extra base hit at
No.
Target field.
No, and that's against and look, Chris Paddock's a good pitcher. He's 5-3, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
He's got an ERA that's pretty solid.
good
And
pitcher.
and they're off the bullpen, especially Griffin Jacks, one of their top prospects, came in and just smoked everybody. One inning, struck out
in
all
the
3
top
guys.
of the first inning, they got their first 2 hitters on via singles.
Yeah.
And basically had 4 singles after that and never threatened to score seriously beyond the first inning.
Charlie Blackmon, the only player with more than a hit. He goes 2 for 4 with a strikeout. Tovar goes 1 for 4. Jacob Stallings, the backup catcher, comes in for Diaz. He gets one of the hits. And the
Jacob Stallings is not a bad backup catcher.
Only walk the Rockies took. Again, this is one of the issues.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before. And obviously it's 5-0. There's plenty of reasons to look at things. It could have been worse, though, because we talked about Dakota Hudson pitching pretty well. Nick Mears gave up 3 runs in an inning in the 3rd, but it doesn't really matter when you score no runs. But the Twins had 2 walks and only 2 strikeouts as a team. The Rockies had 1 walk and 10 strikeouts. And if you were just to give me that, I could probably tell you who won the baseball game.
There was an interesting piece in The Athletic today, and they do this every year. They take a player poll, and it's hard to say exactly how many people participate. I guess it depends on the question that's asked. If it is asked of Major League Baseball players who's the most underrated, many will vote on that.
Sure.
If it's overrated, then players might be reluctant, even as their identity is protected and their anonymity is secure. They might be reluctant to identify even bad organizations.
Right. Well,
above and beyond bad players.
Bad organizations sometimes give washed up players $182 million. You don't want to make anybody mad.
Well, guess who was among the most overrated? That $182 million player. And in the poll, the Rockies were considered among the bottom 5 organizations in Major League Baseball on which to play. And they did quote, again, anonymously, but they did quote during this survey, they did quote players. And the Rockies were said by one player who's apparently been here, spent some time here, it was like going back to the Stone Age.
That's not good. That's not good at all.
Now, there were teams for whom players would prefer not to play in a way that would suggest that maybe the Rockies aren't at the very bottom. Those teams would be Oakland, which won't even be playing in Oakland after this year.
Right.
The White Sox, who are challenging the 62 Mets more seriously than anybody else in baseball this year for the worst record in modern Major League Baseball history.
Yeah, they're disaster.
And you could probably throw in the Angels and maybe even the Mets as being in kind of the same range as the Rockies. Now, the good news was that during their weekly rankings of Major League Baseball teams 1 through 30. The good news is not that the Rockies were ranked 29th. The good news was that with the calling up of Amador, the terrific year that Tovar seems to be having, and the emergence of Doyle as a reasonably strong offensive player. He's obviously a Gold Glove caliber defensive player, that there are sprinkles of hope here and there in the everyday Rockies lineup. With that, I would agree. And some of the starting pitchers have come on. Even Dakota Hudson, as we touched on earlier, was strong last night. You can't win if your team gets shut out.
Nope.
I learned that long ago, by the way.
Yeah.
It's hard to be a winning pitcher when your team doesn't score.
You must score
figure that out.
Yeah, a run. Well, the Rockies will have another crack at it tonight. Their very best pitcher and their only pitcher that actually has a winning record, Cal Quantrill, will take the hill 5-4 with a 3.58 ERA against Louis Varland. And maybe you get a chance to get a hit here because Louis Varland is 0-4 with an ERA of 9.18. Can't get over on that guy.
But Minnesota is still an overwhelming favorite to win the ball game tonight.
That's
how bad the Rockies are on the road.
Over at ESPN bet.
Is that what it is now?
Minus 200. Yeah, that's pretty favorable. So obviously for the Twins, they find themselves in a better position. The Rockies have just been roadkill. And then look, I'm with you. I think when Bud Black talks about his big bats, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. But I'll give him this. Well, compared to what he's got, those kind of are his big bats. And that's on the Rockies organization. It's on GM Bill Schmidt. It's on ownership because that's what Bud Black has. Those are the guys that have power on his team. Maybe night in and night out, even though he doesn't have those big nights anymore, Charlie Blackmon at the age of 36 might still be one of the Rockies' very best players. And with no offense to Charlie Blackmon, generally that's not what you hear on a good baseball club. So that is obviously a major concern. Now, of course, if you want to keep following the Rockies and pay attention to that, we got you covered here. But if you want to dig in real deep, well, Mile High Sports has podcasts galore that will let you dig in deeper to every single topic you want. Thanks for everyone who subscribes to this one and watches it on YouTube and clicks and subscribes. It's great seeing that build a little bit every single day. Nice to be able to have this format in which we can talk to you. And we appreciate you listening to the show on demand as well, because look, that's how it goes, right? I mean, you're busy. You have to fit it into your time. That's okay. Mile High Sports is ready for that. We have plenty of other podcasts that will give you an opportunity to listen to it. Mile High baseball fans can get the latest on the Rockies with Drew Kreisman in the 20th and Blake podcast. Drew's there every single day and making sure that he keeps you up to date on everything with the Rockies. With the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray headed into the Olympics and a tremendously important offseason for the Nuggets. Ryan Blackburn keeps you up to date on everything that's happening with the Nuggets on the Pickaxe and Roll podcast. Arif Dean, who you've heard on this station, gets on the ice, makes sure he's paying attention to the Avalanche, been writing up great stuff, and then he gets you with the latest podcast in another, again, salary cap. Same situation with the Nuggets. An important offseason. Get prime with it on his podcast, Hockey Mountain High. But Bo Nix, we know he's quarterback one, but is he going to be the answer for the Broncos quarterback problems? Well, you can get the latest on that and more on the Broncos podcast with Troy Rank, of our friend from the Denver Post, is featured on the Mile High Sports Podcast Network. Nobody better on the Broncos beat than Troy, and you can get the latest from him directly with terrific guests right there on the Broncos podcast with Troy Rank. All of that and much, much more. Tons of other podcasts that we're talking about. You have the SCO Show for the Buffaloes. Neil Piro was on earlier today. He and Chase Hell do a great job with that. You can catch those as well. Much, much more available. Just search Mile High Sports. Wherever you get your podcast, grab all of them, any of them, listen to them at your convenience, and be up to date on not only the latest, but the deepest and best information on each of those teams. Sandy, we bring it back to what is sort of setting the basketball world on fire right now. And it's an interesting thing to look at. The idea that we talked about the men's Olympic tournament, Nikola Jokic likely playing for Serbia. Caitlyn Clark won't be playing for the United States. She wasn't named to the Olympic team. Now, she is an alternate. We talked about how that sort of worked. Like if someone were to get hurt or drop out prior to the July tournament, she might be named to it, but she was an alternate. And this seems to have made a lot of people very, very upset and thinking that it's wildly unfair. And I guess I look at it and think that while Clark is certainly a name, And certainly she has been the rising tide that lifts the WNBA. The WNBA released some of its attendance and viewership numbers, and they were bonkers. I'll get to some of those in a moment. But like we talked about, even with the men's Olympic team, right? This sport has gone global. And Team USA is trying to look for ways to win gold in a tournament that every Olympics gets tougher and tougher and tougher. And they've decided to go with experience, including international experience, over some of the talent. And we know Clark was a brilliant collegiate player. And by the way, she's starting to warm up and heat up as she gets used to the WNBA too. But everyone is upset about Caitlyn Clark. I think they're missing something. Sandy, the youngest member of that team, the youngest, is Sabrina Ionescu. She's 26.
Right.
The committee looked at it and said they want experience.
No player 25 or younger.
Nobody
is on this team. And it is because, and there is, if not misogyny involved in this, a good deal of condescension, in my opinion. And here's what I mean by that. Women's basketball has grown in popularity by leaps and bounds in recent years. So, in my opinion, we can now begin to pay attention to the basketball and the winning business, and the notion that the men put their best team out there, but that the women shouldn't, because the women should consider marketing to be the ultimate objective in the 2024 Olympics, getting eyeballs to the set. First of all, that's a false choice, because as was established in the NCAA women's tournament this year, it wasn't just Caitlyn Clark's games that people were watching.
Right.
There were games involving other schools, some more recognizable than others, that were garnering very high ratings. The notion that people only watch the WNBA when Caitlyn Clark's team plays, by the way, it's the worst team in the league, and she is not one of the best players.
Well, just so no,
and I'm not even talking about
Washington
individual.
Mystics haven't even won yet, but you're right. The Fever is second to last.
But yeah, yes,
they're a bad team. That's why they got to pick first.
They're a bad team. They're a bad team. And that's why they got Caitlyn Clark in the first place. But I think it's silly to say that. Well, of course, the men who are increasingly challenged, as are the women now.
Yep.
The men should try to win, but the women should think first and foremost of marketing and make Caitlyn Clark the Christian Laettner equivalent from back in 1992.
Right.
College players, kind of token players.
And correct me if I'm wrong.
And never played.
Yeah, when did Christian Laettner play? It was the game. Did Christian Laettner play in anything where the game was even remotely in any dispute? No. And the problem is, as good as Clark is, given the rest of that roster, she's only going to play when games are blowouts too. And yeah, there were reports that the committee thought about that and thought, well, geez, if Caitlyn Clark is on the team and not playing a lot, that might make people upset. But you know who's not also on that team? Angel Reese. She's not on that team.
She's not one of the best players.
Cameron Brink made the 3-on-3 team, but she's not on the U.S. Olympic team. It's not like the only person who didn't make this team. And when you look at some of the players again that are really experienced that didn't make it, Ariel Atkins was on the last Olympic team in Tokyo. Shakira Austin, Benijah Delaney Hamilton, Brianna Jones, all played on the World Cup team in 2022. They're not on it. Aaliyah Boston, Enrique Ogunbowale, they've been to all the training camps. They didn't make the team. Ogunbowale, by the way, has the second highest scoring average in the WNBA behind only Asia Wilson. She didn't make the team. You're exactly right, Sandy. And I'm glad you worded it the way you did, because you're exactly right. This is not about marketing anymore. It's about winning. And the idea that got floated here and there that absolutely drove me up the wall. The idea that got floated that somehow WNBA jealousy kept Caitlyn Clark off the Olympic team? Well, no. And you want me to explain why? Because here's the members of the select committee that selects this team. Yes, the head of league operations, WNBA, Bethany Donovan, is part of it. Jennifer Rosati, who is the team president of the Connecticut Sun. In case you're curious how her job's doing, their team's 10-1 and the best in the league. Winners. The other members, you might know. Delisha Milton-Jones, the head coach of Old Dominion, not WNBA. LSU assistant Simone Augustus, a tremendous player in her own right. Oh, and Dawn Staley, the former coach of the U.S. team, and now brought the best coach in college basketball. There's no WNBA. There's no anti-Caitlyn Clark stuff. Think Dawn Staley has something against Caitlyn Clark? Why? Her team knocked Caitlyn Clark off to win the title.
I heard another claim that it didn't strike me as coming from an intelligent place, if the claim is even legitimate at all, and I'm not sure it is. That the thinking went that if you put Clark on the team and she didn't play very much or
people would
at all
get upset,
then her fans would be upset.
How'd that go with Christian Laettner?
I'm saying, well, wait a minute. That people are going to be upset, but they would still watch.
Right.
Otherwise, how would they know whether she's playing a lot or playing not at all? And it's dumb anyway. I will encapsulate this entire conversation into 4 words. They are these: she needs to rest. He has played essentially on a constant basis for 13 of the past 15 months. Just think about that. Out of the last 15 months, he's had, air quotes, rest for 2 of those 15 months. Name one other basketball player, heck, one other athlete who in the last 15 months has been an active participant playing major stressful minutes.
As the team's top player.
As the team's top player.
And the top defensive focus for the other team.
Has played for the last 15 months, 13 of those 15 months, and has had the burden both on the court and off the court that she has had to carry. He needs to rest.
The idea that, and the point she was playing, she's been playing the whole time. He was invited to go to some of the, like Ogunbowale, right? Who was at all the, basically the OTAs, for lack of a better term, and didn't make the team. Clark was invited to those, but she couldn't attend because she was too busy leading her team to the Final Four.
Right. Exactly.
And the funny thing is, if you think that this is some sort of controversy, you don't even have to listen to us. Listen to Caitlyn Clark.
Yeah.
Who talked about it. And
reaction when you saw the USA team yesterday, the roster come out?
Yeah, I think I'm excited for the girls that are on the team. I know it's the most competitive team in the world, and I know it could have gone either way of me being on the team, me not being on the team. So, I'm excited for them. I'm going to be rooting them on to win gold. I was a kid that grew up watching the Olympics, so it'll be fun to watch them.
What was your level of disappointment not hearing your name on the roster?
Honestly, no disappointment. Like, I think it just gives you something to work for. That's a dream. Hopefully one day I can be there, and I think it's just a little more motivation. You remember that, and hopefully in 4 years, when 4 years comes back around, I can be there.
Did you have a direct conversation with managing director over there at USAB recently?
Yeah, they called me and let me know, and before everything came out, which was really respectful of them, and I appreciated that. And they did the same for every girl that made the team or every girl that didn't make the team. There's a lot of players in the Olympic pool, so it wasn't like I was the only one they had to call. They had to make quite a few calls.
Are you looking forward to a break? From Olympic action, basketball in general, I guess?
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be really nice. I mean, I've loved competing every single second, but it's going to be a great month for my body to, first of all, get rest and get healthy and just get a little time away from basketball and the craziness of everything that's been going on, and, just find some peace and quiet for myself. But then additionally, a great opportunity for us to work and get better, a great opportunity for myself to get in the weight room, to work on the court and work at things that I want to get better at that I maybe didn't have time going from college to the pro season. So I'm looking forward to it. But at the same time, like, we still have a month of games where we have a lot of opportunities to win a lot of games. So that's where my main focus is.
Go on to say, now this was private, but it's been quoted. She told her coach, Christy Sides, the Fever, Coach, they woke a monster. So if it does provide additional motivation, that's great. But she talked about the right things. She talked about additional practice time with the team she's playing for right now, which would be nice.
Yeah.
And she also spoke of the need to get off this I won't even call it a roller coaster. I think it's been a lot more stressful than that.
Certainly.
And yes, you're dealing with mostly praise, but you're dealing with some physical forms of retaliation. You're dealing with, I think, well-meaning and yet well-established women basketball players who understand Caitlyn Clark's impact, but also understand that no rookie, whether it's Reese or Clark or anybody else, is going to supplant the best players, not only in this country, but some of the best female basketball players in the world. And it shouldn't come down to that. There will be a time, maybe in the next Olympics, as close by as the next Olympics, that Caitlyn Clark will be needed to help, not carry, help U.S. women's basketball. But why does that have to be 2024 when the last 2 years, 23 and 24, have obviously been insanely stressful
and
for this
during
particular
that
individual.
time, most of the people on this roster were playing together in international play. Most of them. Diana Taurasi is going to wait for her 6th Olympics. She's 42 years old. 42.
Right.
Caitlyn Clark can appear in 4 or 5 Olympics in her career. And you look at the folks that are there, 4 members of Becky Hammond's back-to-back champion Las Vegas Aces, including Asia Wilson, the best player on the planet. Yeah. And I get that there are a lot of people just jumping into the WNBA because of Caitlyn Clark. And good. There's no downside to that. But again,
and they're going to stop watching if she's not on the Olympics.
Yeah, really. You're not going to watch. You're not going to watch the medal race. Well, then you're not really a fan, are you? So don't worry about it. If you can't go watch Asia Wilson and Kelsey Plum and Brittany Griner and Sabrina Ionescu go compete for the gold, I'm sorry. Well, maybe you just don't like basketball. That's okay. That's fine. But stop pretending it's something it's not. Again, Ionescu at 26 is the youngest member of this team. The U.S. went for experience, and they've gone for as much as they can towards that international play, because now you're right. Women's basketball is mature. It's not about marketing. It's about winning. And you know what? That's where it should be. That's healthy. That's good.
A sign of growth.
And Caitlyn Clark will get her time, as will Reese and Brink, who I bet you the next Olympics, all 3 of them will be on that squad.
Absolutely. And again, back to the point, she's a first alternate. There's a chance that she still might be asked to play, but I think it would be better. Presumptuous though this may be for me to say,
hear it in her voice.
I think the sport will be better, and it will be better for her to get the rest.
And you know what? Let some people learn about the other stars and enjoy the sport as a whole. There's a lot to it. I think people are missing a lot of that. Cult of personality is great, but when your sport's mature, you don't need it. Enjoy the games, enjoy the talent. And that's what will happen with the U.S. women's basketball team. And soon enough, the next Olympics, Caitlyn Clark will be a major part of that as well. It's been fun breaking this down with you, of course. Thanks to Neela Piro for joining us, talking about the interesting little coincidences between what Utah's trying to do with its NHL team as opposed to some of the Colorado teams. And maybe Neela's right. Maybe there's a little tweaking going on there between ownerships. Could we possibly remember the Jazz owner and the Nuggets owners? Of course, it's the same. So there's already a rivalry maybe there's a little bit there as well. The Denver Broncos undergoing mini camp for the next couple of days. We'll have more for you on that, of course, all week long to break it all down. Thank you for joining us. Danny Bailey is the man in the booth making all of this work, doing all the sound, and of course, making us look as good as we possibly can. So nobody works harder in this business than Danny Bailey. We will be back tomorrow. Thanks to everybody who watched the program. You can always click subscribe, get it whenever you'd like it, and we'll notify you when you subscribe. You'll know when we're going live, and you can pop in right there as well. We'll be back at it tomorrow. For Sandy Clough, I'm Shawn Drotar. This is Mile High Sports.